Welcome to Burning Questions. In every episode, we take on 5 essential questions about life on a rapidly warming planet. I'm Leslie Davenport, your host and a climate psychology consultant. And together with thought leaders, activists, and people from all walks of life, we explore how to build resilience and courage and create real change. Transformation can't be done alone. It takes all of us. So thank you for joining, and let's get started. I'm excited to introduce our first guest for the very first episode, Dr. Laura Carter Robinson. She's a clinical psychologist and founder of Humanity&Planet, and is known for her work on climate and ecological change. She's a climate psychology speaker, consultant, and educator, and is also a climate therapist and advocate. She's in the American Psychological Association's Climate Change Psychology Advisory Group and was formerly on the Executive Committee of Climate Psychology Alliance of North America. And her first book is expected in 2026. Laura, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much, Leslie. I'm so happy to be here with you today, and I'm really thrilled to be your first guest and to kick off these burning questions. It's wonderful that you're doing this.
Me too. Well, let's jump right in.
Okay.
So, what was your climate wake-up moment, that point when the reality of the crisis really hit home for you?
Yeah, for me personally, it was mountain glaciers that were my climate wake-up moment. I've had awareness, of course, for a long time about global warming, and it's just been an increasing level of waking up to it over time as it became public knowledge and becoming concerned about it, including about glaciers receding from climate change. And sometimes it would hit in big ways and sometimes in small ways, as I think it does for many people. But then one day, a few years back, I was doing some academic reading about glaciers and kind of digging around, and I went to a report on the status of glaciers. So I started reading just there at my desk about how many glaciers will be gone by 2050 and how something like 2 billion people depend on glaciers for their freshwater supply and for agriculture. And that was the moment when the full scale of it all just suddenly hit me so viscerally as I sat there at my desk, and it just threw me into a state of grief and heartbreak for a long time. And just feeling all this astonishing beauty and these iconic glaciers that have been here for so long, and and being destroyed, right? And so much of humanity being harmed as a result of this too. And I was just weeping, really just weeping at my keyboard as I read this. And the world was really changed for me after that. It was sort of like that experience that you have when you've had an experience of grief or news of a terrible illness or something like that, and everyone else is just carrying on in their daily life, and you just can't figure out how it is that people are just not taking to the streets and understanding what's happening. So and going on that way. So I don't know what it was about that particular moment that brought it home right then, but I do find it really difficult to read about glaciers still. That's sort of my one climate area that's extremely hard for me. And since that time, I've been able to see and experience some glaciers in Canada and Iceland and Washington State with my family, and there's nothing like being with your children in the presence of something that is so awe-inspiring and also disappearing and what it doesn't need to be. And so it's profoundly sad and also motivating, motivating to not turn away, right? And to take action. So, there's that. And I hoped that I sort of honored those glaciers by sort of witnessing their existence and their magnificence and all of that while I was there, and really acknowledging kind of the life-giving gifts that they've given to us and give to all of humanity. So that was kind of my experience. I recently learned, just to put a plug in for this, that apparently 2025 actually is the International Year of glacier preservation or something like that. So,
Mm.
yeah, such a big issue, but it's certainly the one that, yes, really got me and really drove it home, for sure.
So, Laura, how do you navigate the emotional impacts of so much harm and upheaval? What really supports you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something I could talk about for a long time. I think there are so many things that we all need for support and a lot of things that I turn to. So I'll just maybe touch on a few things because there are so many. But
Yeah.
I think one thing that kind of helps me keep overwhelm at bay is almost bringing things back to sort of the present task at hand, as opposed to focusing on the vastness of the world and of the climate crisis.
Mhm.
It just helps me feel like I'm keeping my eye on the ball, right in front of me. Instead of having to keep the entire field of play in mind. And I trust that, of course, so many climate concerned people everywhere around the world also have their eyes on what's in front of them, and we're working in tandem. And I really feel that in my bones, and that really helps me to sort of
Mhm.
take that approach. And just some other things, when I'm doing climate work or maybe when I'm reading news that's particularly distressing or tough to hear, I'll often take a moment to pause, take a deep breath, sometimes physically sort of shake it off, shake my hands in the air like this, or I do my own little version of dance moves around the house while playing music and singing. You don't have to be a good singer or dancer to do this, but I love singing, and it makes me feel good. I think just something that feels good, is important. And then, of course, just deep connection with family and friends, and particularly with my kids, is really essential for me, to sustain all of this. And also deep connection and time with nature, and in a quiet way, kind of away from crowds and away from the built environment. And
Yes.
for me, it's so important, right? It's sort of so critical. And for me, there's really this persistent call inside me to do that. And so I sort of have to get outdoors a lot, to walk and hike. Yeah, it's critical. It's life sustaining for me. So, and I think the experiencing sort of awe and wonder in nature is also really critical for me. And I really love the little things, the little details in nature. I think a lot of people like vistas and climbing up to the top of a mountain and getting a view, but I'm more of a details person, and I like all the little things along the trail. And I also get a lot of peace from the wild animals that are in my neighborhood, of which there are many fawns and coyotes, birds, and so those are really important to me. And maybe last but not least, I think fun and lightheartedness is actually
Mhm.
really helps me kind of counteract, the heaviness of climate change. It's so heavy. And so I personally myself sort of like good natured humor, kind of, for me, that takes the form of laughing at the antics of my dogs, who I think are the funniest dogs on earth. I'm sure everyone thinks that about their dogs, but it really helps. And watching sort of quirky, funny shows on TV, shows with a heart that kind of speak to the goodness of the human condition and things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm not a big TV watcher, but I'm kind of watching shows now that other people watched long ago. But it's nice to enjoy those, and that helps just to kind of get some distance from it and remember that life has fun and enjoyable parts too. It's not
Yes.
all the dark part.
Kind of keeping the big picture of life, and then lots of forms of relationships and connections. Nature, family, friends, colleagues. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, for sure.
Well, so from where you stand, what is the single most powerful driver for meaningful climate action?
Yeah, it's again such a good question. And I think for me, this really gets at the question of meaning and what it means to us, to each of us to take climate action and to be a person in these times. And I think that circles back to me to sort of the idea of personal values and a belief system. And I think that values and a belief system based on care and on fairness and connection, like we were just talking about, can be the most powerful driver for climate action, because values are so central to who we are, right? And they lead us to have feelings and thoughts, right? So that we might feel anger at what's happening, and a sense of anger at the unjustness of what's going on with climate change. And anger, of course, is a really strong motivator for climate action. So we get there through our values, I think, and our values also guide our beliefs, and those propel us forward even during really difficult challenges and difficult times like we're experiencing right now. And I think it can be helpful to articulate, I think, maybe, and reflect on what our beliefs are and our values and what's meaningful to us around all of this. And I think that's true in general, and around climate change for sure. And so for me, some of my beliefs include that actions matter, our actions matter, my actions matter, and that one of my responsibilities as a human being is to apply my skills and abilities toward contributing to the greater good. And I really believe in being awake to reality, and that it's important to stand up for what's right. And so those values drive my climate action. And I do think, kind of at the end of the day, that most people want the world to be a place where children are safe and happy, and where everyone, including every person, right, who's feeling anything, can be safe and happy. And so I think the key is taking these values and keeping them front and center, in our lives, and living them, right? And so when we feel and live that way, and we connect these values, and we manage the feelings that come up around them, because there are huge feelings, as we know, that come up around the climate, and getting help with that if you need that, and or sharing that with others in community, then acting on climate change, I think, becomes really consistent with who you are when you're coming from that framework. So that's why I think it really drives that meaningful action, because it's coming from a deeper place.
Yes. Yes. Well, you've been at this for quite a while. So have you found just sort of a nugget of wisdom where it just refuels your inspiration or your strength? It could be a practice or a quote or a book or a podcast.
Yeah, there are so many things that are inspirational and motivational. And I could quote so many things. I think that for me, I don't tend to go to a quote or to a particular sort of pithy thing. Again, though, even though there are many, and so many out there for people to find. For me, I don't really turn to this experience, but it's more internalized for me. It's something that my mom said, actually. So I'll quote my mom, and then I'll explain it. But her quote was, and it's something that sort of gives me strength and inspiration internally, and has for my whole life. Her question was, "What can we do to help?" And she said that many times in my life, but a particular time that really resonates with me, and that I revisit internally. So again, not a book or anything like that, but an experience, I guess. Is this particular time was, I was probably 10 or 11, and my brother was as well. We're twins, and we woke up on Christmas morning, just three of us, my brother and my mom and me, and we found, my mom was a social worker. She was a caseworker at our county social services agency. And she was working with a parent with two young boys. The other parent was no longer in the home. And they woke on Christmas morning to find that the boys' Christmas presents had been stolen. Oh. And there's a lot more detail in here that I'm not sharing, but it's a really extraordinary situation. And but the dad had saved up for them all year, and my mom was really had really admired him as a person, and how he was so devoted to his children. And this is such a different era, obviously, than now, and a lot more boundaries and regulations around client interaction and that sort of thing now. But he called her and Christmas morning, and was in tears, and asking if she knew what he could do. And so my mom told us what happened, and said, again, what can we do to help? So, we didn't, my family didn't have a lot ourselves in the way of money or resources, and we really empathized with this situation. It was horrible, right, for anyone to hear about, I think. And but an hour or two of resourcefulness and gift wrapping later, we showed up at their house. She'd already talked to the dad about this, but because Santa and his reindeer had accidentally dropped off their gifts at our house, and I will never forget that moment. I will never forget that Christmas. That was my Christmas, and the faces of those boys and that dad, and how it felt, right? And so those values are just at the center for me and made me who I am. So that's where I go. That's where I go to get my strength and inspiration.
Beautiful story. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it was a really, really powerful moment for sure. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else on your heart or mind that you'd like to share?
Sure. I think, I can maybe talk a little bit about nature, in thinking about all of this and our kind of connection with nature, as we were talking about before, and our kind of relationships with other people, whether that's around the world or close to home. I often think about love and that relationship. And so, there's this saying that I'm sure you've heard, it's true, right? That love is a verb. And that's usually, or maybe always, as far as I know, considered in terms of human relationships. So, and it's the idea that we are sort of actively, not passively involved with a relationship, right? So we're not passively in a state of love. Love means intentionality. It means purposeful action. It means tending the relationship, and caring for it. And I think expanding that idea to the natural world is really important, because it's true of our relationship with the natural world too. And a lot of our culture doesn't think about relationship when we think about nature, right? It's often seen as a place we drive through, looking at the trees, right? Or we go to it. Maybe we go in it. As something we like to look at, or like to visit, or go whatever. And yet, when we realize that it's a relationship, I think it shifts the perspective, right? We can look at it and look at our role in that relationship, and realize that in our world, we're often in this, well, often, maybe most of the time, right, in this really one-sided relationship with nature. And as we know from any one-sided relationship, that's not good. It's not healthy. It's not sustainable, and it doesn't work. And so I think that when nature is giving us so much more than we give it, and there's so many benefits to nature, and whether that's from mental health benefits, physical health benefits, just the peacefulness even of just being in nature, and the idea that we need to give something back is really important, to be in this reciprocal, mutual relationship, and to really think of it as a relationship. And so I think when we do that, and we think about the need to tend that relationship, not just take from it, it shifts everything, right? And it also feels really good to be in a healthy relationship of any kind, including with the natural world. So, just want to add that maybe as a final reflection.
Beautiful. Yes. Well, thank you so much for offering your warmth, your presence, your insights and perspectives here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Leslie. And yeah, it's been great talking with you, and I love your questions, and it's great to share this with you.
Thank you. For those of you who'd like to know more about Laura and connect with her, you'll see on screen her website, and you can also connect with her on Instagram and LinkedIn. So hope to see you soon for our next episode of Burning Questions. And remember, we're always better together. See you soon.